We are waiting for people to show up. Hey, everybody. Great to see you. Alex, what a delightful surprise. We're going to have a small group, I think, this evening. Great to see Laura show up because, Laura, you are going to have some fun with questions. Are you willing to share the pictures and the... Okay, awesome. Yay. Excellent. And hello to Michael. I'll get us into gallery view. In case you're wondering who this quirky person next to me is, that would be my sister, Andrea. Hi, hello, hey, great to see you, Tracy. Anita and TJ. Oh, I can already see Anita's wearing like the holiday colors and you guys look great. Michael, hi, nice to see you. Oh, well, we are in for all kinds of fun this evening. We are talking about healthy deviant decluttering with my sister, Andrea Gerasimo, the one and the only. One of the cutest. Boy, guys, when she was a baby, I won't go into it.
No, but she did point out that I'm shorter, and she's like, I wonder if we should get a box for you to stand on. I'm like, I think it's okay, as long as my head's like above water.
Thanks for bearing with my kind of low-tech studio here this evening. Yeah, there's no Apple boxes, nothing like that. And Andrea and I have presented a lot together in the past. Done events together, I would say. I've been a presenter at her events. She's been a presenter at my events. And I've had the privilege of including her wisdom in a lot of the curriculum in my courses, even when Andrea herself is not present. I end up talking about how clutter impacts our physical, mental, and emotional health and well-being. And here in phase 2 of Healthy Deviant You, we're talking about reclaiming our mojo, and that means reclaiming our personal power, our energy, our vitality. And I think one of the side benefits of decluttering your space is often a reclamation of that kind of juju. Would you not agree?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, physically, mentally, emotionally, and you can just go back and forth. You do one thing and it affects the other. It's exciting.
Yes. So our goal tonight is to talk about how healthy deviant decluttering differs from maybe what you thought to believe about decluttering in general, about some conventional approaches to decluttering and organizing, and also about some of the specific strategies that Andrea likes to recommend to people who are using decluttering as a conscious strategy for improving any part of their life. And I'll begin by saying, if for those of you who are not already aware, Andrea is a certified feng shui consultant, studied with the
Black Hat Sect. Carol Hyder out of the Twin Cities, for people who are familiar with her and her group over the years.
Yeah, and also a highly qualified yoga instructor who trained at Kripalu.
Thank you.
Welcome. And those two things really inform each other. And I feel very proud that I gave Andrea some language to describe, well, and now it's your language. I'll let you describe the intersection between them.
Oh, well, yeah, it was great. In 2000, I was looking at leaving my job at that point, my career at the university, and I was like, but I'm doing these disparate things, and I just feel like I need an identity. I don't know how to put them together. And she was like, well, yoga is just like feng shui for your house, and feng shui is just like yoga for your body and being. And I'm like, oh my God.
Wait, other way around. Yoga's like, yoga.
No, I mean, yoga's like, the other way. They got it. Yes. And actually we ended up doing, the reason that was in my head is I was thinking about the article that we did for Evergo and Experience Life magazine, which was Yoga for the Home. And it was basically about feng shui, but helping people understand it in a way that was more intimate about what makes a space healthy is so similar to what makes a body healthy. If there's stagnation, we have pain and disease. And if we have proper flow, then we have vibrant well-being and all of that. So, yeah.
And I've really come to think about clutter as a form of inflammation. The kind of chaotic force in the body that is dragging us down and creating discomfort and impeding the flow of healthy energy. So we're going to talk about how to deal with that, those pro-inflammatory factors that also produce clutter in our lives. So just to make the connection clear for those of you who might not have read some of the earlier stuff I sent about this, in my mind, decluttering is a really essential part of healthy deviance because the way that clutter accumulates is really a complete expression of how the unhealthy default reality works. The unhealthy default reality makes us want all kinds of things and think that our lives will be improved by having more things. And if only you had this one thing, you'd be a better, happier, more successful person or a more beautiful person. Even in the healthy realm, we end up accumulating supplements and health and beauty products and aids and diets and pills and powders that can fill drawers and cupboards and our entire space. So in my view, the act of decluttering is one that takes us through amplified awareness, noticing first, where is the clutter? What is that about? How did it get there? And then using preemptive repair strategies to begin to get ahead of the clutter, learning how to minimize its accumulation, and then continuous growth and learning. Here we are learning some specific skills, and Andrea is really good about imparting strategies that make the whole challenge of decluttering easier and more successful. And I think that's really important because I want to start our conversation with the fact that so many people want to declutter. Let's just take a look out here. I'm assuming that everybody's here is because do you have at least one space in your home or workspace that you actively have been wanting to declutter? How many of you have given it a shot before? How many of you actually have embarked on this attempt and been like, okay. How many of you have not even approached it because it's been too intimidating? Michael, you haven't raised your hand on either one. He's thinking about it.
I've half tried.
Yeah, you've given it a shot. And would you mind sharing what happened to you when you gave it a try?
It's just overwhelming. We live in an old ancient house, and there's boxes of parts and nuts and bolts from our old house, and it's like you start collecting and putting things in bins, and you end up with a whole collection of bins. And
Yes.
I'm seriously considering taking it all to the thrift store, and just, if I need something, I'll go buy it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's a very good representative experience of getting started and then realizing that you can't do it. You just cannot commit the time and the energy required to know what to keep, what to give away, how to organize what you're keeping. So
that is a horrible feeling, and I have been there too. and I've been present with a lot of people as they experienced that feeling. It's intense.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the missteps or the mistaken notions, the myths that people are holding in their mind as they approach the idea of decluttering, that you think people get wrong, or that they launch in with the wrong energy, or just energy that isn't ideal, or a plan that isn't ideal.
Yeah.
And
how long do we have?
Let's spend a few minutes on this.
Some jump to mind right away, and one is essentially you were kind of referring to it, which is like, what do we do because of what we're told to do, or are given this advertisement or anything else that says just do this. It might be a book, it might be, in fact, a professional declutterer. Just go get a bunch of bins, a label maker, you're good to go. And I have actually come on the scene after that all happened and been like, yeah, that didn't really work so great. It also can be such an excuse for just keeping more stuff. And I've seen phenomenal examples of that, including someone who alphabetized all their bins and then created an index card container to tell them which bin contained what items. I mean, my head almost exploded when I went, what is this like? But I think that idea that all we have to do is get the containers and all the neat little things and then we're decluttered. So that's number one. Number two is the thing you just said, the diving in, that sometimes people will just think, all right, I've just got to do it. Now, it's interesting. Sometimes that works with certain things. I was thinking on the way here tonight about the comparison between, say, decluttering and starting a workout program. My boyfriend, who likes to run, says that when he needs to get started in running again, his deal is, I put on my shoes. And then that's what gets him out the door and then gets him down the path, whatever happens after that. And in that sense, that's true with decluttering. On the other hand, that frustration that just makes you go, I've had it, I'm pulling everything out of the closet, I'm doing this now, is one of the worst things that I find people can do, that it leads to often that overwhelm. If you live with other people, they'll often freak out, like, what's going on? So I don't recommend that, and we'll be talking a little later about the system that I recommend. It's super simple, very few things that you'll need to go procure. But I do think, like with a workout thing, I want to say this, that the more that you do it, your energy level goes up. And so your capacity and your ability to do it without feeling really awful goes up as well. And so it's bit by bit though, right? You don't go out and run 4 miles. You'll hate it. You'll never want to do it again. You don't decide I'm going to declutter my entire bedroom in one day when you've never done it. You're essentially constipated and you're now trying to do it too quickly. And so I think it is really important to find little baby steps. And I know we talked ahead of time about what some good starting places are that are bite-sized pieces that are doable, will allow you to feel successful and come out energized and excited to do more.
That's great. And I will say too, Andrea used the word constipated. I think she was speaking symbolically about having all the stuff kind of piled up in a space and making it actually harder for you to move in the space or do anything, create any flow. Or know where to put anything. And I think that's one of the strategic missteps that a lot of people start with, is this idea. Sometimes people who've read the life-changing magic of tidying up, or they take everything out of an overcramped closet all at once, throw it in onto the bed, for example.
I actually think Marie Kondo recommended on the floor.
She threw it on the floor. Okay, on the floor, and then right. So the floor and the surfaces now in that space are
pull it all out.
All completely covered.
Yeah.
And you now have the chaos exploded all around you without the system that you're going to describe in a minute. And people just look at it and they go, I can't do this. And they move out of that room. And that room becomes the room. You know what I mean? The extra room, like the extra closet, the place that no one shall look. We talked about shame holes earlier, or maybe it's coming up for those of you who haven't already been through HD once. But shame holes to me are that, the things that you haven't gotten to, and you're a little bit embarrassed that you haven't got to, or a lot embarrassed, and it's energy draining even to approach it again. And the more times you've tried and failed, the more difficult it is. But let's talk a little bit about the healthy deviant decluttering mindset and how it's different from the KonMari method, for example. I think you've talked, about how much we're both fans of the idea of the life-changing magic of tidying up, and both of us have benefited, and I know so many people have benefited from that approach, many of which have then it can't wait to show you their sock drawer or whatever it is. I think Anna Neal was one of those who shared pictures of her sock drawer very proudly. But talk a little bit about how your approach differs from that approach, psychologically or philosophically, first of all, and then we'll talk about technically.
Well, I'll just affirm the similarity that you kind of referred to, which is her, does it bring you joy piece. That is extremely powerful. And I love that it takes us, frankly, into our body, which as a yoga teacher, I always say noticing precedes change. Noticing, wow, my right hip is different than my left, allows us to start reflecting. Why is that? Why am I in pain? Or what's the problem here? What am I doing to contribute to this? So I think using our body as an antenna is extremely powerful. That's our most original source of knowledge, if you will. We'll feel it in our gut or in our chest or in our neck being tight or whatever it might be. So does it bring you joy is a great direct indicator. Should I keep this? Shouldn't I keep it? But I think that one of the things that I've witnessed a lot of people not make space for is some of the feelings that come up while they're decluttering. Some of the grief, some of the shame, etc. They just want to, I've had people say, can I just hire you? I'll leave. You come make it look nice and I'll come back. I'm like, no, it doesn't work like that, because you'll just recreate it, whether it's, for example, and I think this is appropriate in the gift giving season particularly, but have you shifted your relationship with how you handle, say, the gifts people have given you and your feelings of obligation and so on? So it's unless we take the time to do that journey internally and allow time for it and space, we will keep repeating the same patterns. And so a lot of people don't talk about that kind of uncomfortable side of decluttering. We tend to talk about it more like the physical space. Here's what you do with files, and here's what you do with clothes, and what have you.
Yeah.
So,
well, and it's interesting. It's been a long time since I read The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, but I remember one of my takeaways was that Marie Kondo tended to not talk a lot about the emotional resonance of things. And, and I think the simplicity of the book is part of what makes it so appealing, but there's a lot to it. And there's some things that don't necessarily spark joy, but that make your life easeful. There's no toilet brush in the history of my life that has sparked joy, but I would be less happy without a toilet brush, I promise you. And so I think that there's sort of a hierarchy of needs that we all have too, and it's important to reflect that. Talk a little bit, if you would, and we're going to get to your questions, fear not. You can put your questions, if you have already questions, in the chat, and we'll also open up a full period for questions a little bit later. But would you share, to the extent that your approach differs from Marie Kondo's tactically, a couple of the differences that you think are the most significant?
It's actually been a long time since I read that book, but it's kind of funny because even so, I will sometimes go on a little rant, and I kind of joked that I should write the retort to Marie Kondo because there are things like, put everything on your bed and your floor that makes me crazy. Or this is a great example that I think is sort of the kind of overly perfectionistic or giving in to making it beautiful, which, by the way, beauty is a really important part of then loving what you've created enough that you want to protect it. So beauty is important. But I remember her talking about how to store your shirts and saying it as if everyone absolutely should do it this way. And it was that you would fold your t-shirts, etc., so that the fold part would go upright, and you'd put pieces of cardboard in the drawer to kind of subdivide your drawer. And it didn't address what happens when, let's say 3 out of your 5 t-shirts are in the laundry, and so the other 2 fall over in the drawer, or they're slippery fabric, which I happen to have a lot of those kinds of tank tops. And I remember reading that and thinking, this is a horrible idea. So it might really work great for some people for whom that is their joy. I have personally been friends with and lived with multiple people who do not get a lot of pleasure out of folding things in a very specific way. They don't want to work at the Gap or Banana Republic. That is not their thing. And so I think, we can get really cluttered with people's ideas, particularly professionals, of how we should go about a thing. And so my system is very practical and almost mechanical, if you will, for keeping things moving and protecting you from hitting that wall of overwhelm.
We're going to talk about that.
Do we want to get into that a little bit?
Yeah, I want to talk about that sooner than later, because I think once people understand that fundamental strategy and the goal behind it, it will make more sense. Why don't we talk about that? And I'll share too, Andrea does talk about this in some of the articles in that Order Out of Chaos series that was featured in Experience Life magazine a few years back. Great series, really popular. And she goes through space by space. It's one person's car, another person's closet, another person's office, another person's laundry room, bedroom. And I found that really helpful too, because it almost gives you permission to not feel that you need to do everything all at once, but it gives you really specific strategies for those challenge areas that are unique to those respective spaces. Right. And so I'm going to have Andrea describe the 101 of decluttering for you here, and then we'll talk a little bit more about some of the specific areas of challenge or some special tips that she has. Go for it, Dre. What is the beginning of this thing?
Well, Emplar has a handout that I've been giving to people for years that she will be sending to you as well that kind of reiterates this. So you can kind of let go of, trying to take 1,000 notes or what have you. But in short, you start small. And honestly, that could be your purse or your wallet or your car. But some of the main areas might be, say, your entryway, or super small, your bedside tables, not even getting into the drawers, just the surface, right? So when I say small, it could be that little. But even if you're doing a small thing, I recommend having a system. Now, the system I'm going to describe makes more sense if you're actually, not taking just things out of your wallet. You could probably do that in your kitchen. But what I have are 2 foot by 4 foot folding tables that I got at Home Depot. They're plastic tops, metal legs, and I like them because they're only 2 foot deep, which means I can actually fit them in a hallway or like a confined space versus like a 6-foot buffet type table that a lot of people have. And I can put 2 of them next to each other. I can put one in front and one in behind. I can make a U shape. I'm not saying you all have to go out and buy 2 or even 4 of these, but depending on the quantity of decluttering that you want to do over time, it might be a worthwhile investment to have those.
Tiny aside, they also work like ironing boards do for standing desks. If you ever need additional space or, for extra people coming over for dinner. But 2x4, yeah, that's a person, a size that a person can easily handle and move. They're very light, which is nice.
And pretty stable as long as you click the legs in, right?
And these things cost like $6 at IKEA or something,
no.
right?
The tables that I'm talking about, Home Depot, I think they were like $50 each.
Okay.
But I've had them for years. Again, you can reuse them in myriad ways. In fact, I did have someone use one as a desk during COVID when they all of a sudden had to work from home. Some in our family. So
clearly, Andrea has invested more in her 2x4 tables than I have. So.
Yeah, it's true. But you could use an ironing table actually as one of your surfaces. But this is the important part: is that you're creating a surface to work on that allows you to not bend over to the floor. Anything lying on the floor is heavier. It's harder on your body, and it will cost you more energy, and you'll wear out faster. You want to have a garbage can, a recycling receptacle, and then you also want to have receptive bins for things like giveaway. Now, that might be multiple categories depending on who you are. Some people are like, oh, I'm going through a lot of clothes. I want to have a category of clothes that's going to go just to the women's shelter. Or I've got a category of things that say I need to return to family. Or what always happens to me is, oh, this is for my sisters to look at and see if they want this scarf, earrings, blah, blah, blah. So as you go along, you might add these categories. I use Rubbermaid bins, and then I put like paper grocery bags in them, and I'll, either write on them or I'll create tags. Again, it just kind of depends on what works for you. But I like having those things that you're decluttering into look different than kind of anything else. It is really helpful. So, if you have to pause partway through, life happens, you get a phone call. You can come back and you don't have to try and remember that pile over there in the corner. Now, what was that? I've done that to myself before. I'm like, oh, I'm just going to do one drawer. I won't set up the system. And then I'm like, oh, I should have set up the system.
Yes. Another thing that I found enormously helpful about having those receptacles clearly labeled with index cards or big Post-it notes with big magic marker is that when you're standing there holding this object going, what am I doing with this, which we'll get to in a minute, there are only so many choices of places for it to go, and it's going to go somewhere. But you don't have to think about, wait, is that the bag for the giveaway center, and that is this the trash, is that the recycling, is that I'm going back and maybe this is going to my sister? So I feel like there's a way you described it to me is eliminating momentary confusion or friction that could slow you down, and having them pre-labeled and at a height that you can easily deposit into is very helpful. And having your sorting surface be something that's kind of more or less at eye-ish or waist height is helpful.
And you can have some of those, like the garbage, recycling, etc., might be on the floor, as long as they're stable, lined up. Again, if it's a trash can that's open and you can just toss in, that's the way. You don't want to be fussing with a bag every time you got to put something in there. But so then what you do is, as an example, if you were going to, say, clear out an entire closet, and I know that one of you have that on your mind, I would take a series of boxes, bins, whatever you need to, and clear out everything. And we do what I call like sort of search and rescue, which is like, Actually, I take that back. You go into kind of a mindless place of just put it in. Don't go, oh, is this recyclable? Isn't it? Put it in the bin. Put it in the bin. You could even have someone help you with that part because they're just helping you get everything into a container. That might go all the way to one side. And then when you're ready to begin, you bring that first container up onto the table and you begin to look at those items and make choices. And one of the other categories that's one of the really important ones is I call the disseminate or the other rooms category. So you might have one category of the things you intend to put back in that closet. But you don't want to be then walking over to the closet each time and putting an item away. Again, this is how you stay present, focused, and obviously you'd clean the heck out of that closet. And it's really a fun experience. And I think energetically, when you do that, there's a shift that happens where you're also less willing to put back things that are like, oh, it's broken or it doesn't fit me. You've created a really pristine space that you want to keep honoring.
I want to underline something that's really different. Again, kind of contrasting between the KonMari method, or I think what many of us do instinctively. It's like, I'm going to do this closet, and we gotta pull everything out and throw it on the bed or the floor or whatever it is, without in any way containerizing it or organizing it on the way out. I mean, again, you're not organizing it, but putting it in I use Banker's boxes a lot because they're the same kind of doable size. They have holders, they have tops, and you can just take a box and, kind of that classic arm off the shelf and like whoosh, into the box. And then the box goes over here, and now you have 12 boxes or you have 24 boxes, but they're in an ordered fashion right away. You can say, I'll do one more box before I have lunch, versus like there's too much stuff I can't ever go back in there. You can feel a sense of success by moving through those initial kind of holding cells or containers.
That is a really, really great point, because again, you might want to do the closet all at once and you might physically just not be able to. I've had people like, I can't stand for that long or what have you.
Or you have an allergic fit.
Oh, right, dust. But so, and this is another reason you do not lay that stuff on your bed, or if you're going to, please cover it with a sheet first. Clothes have a shocking amount of dust in them. It's crazy.
Oh, skin cells, hair, spider webs, sometimes mold. You'd be shocked when you really start examining your clothing. This is one of the benefits of decluttering a closet, is that you actually really do get to investigate. Some of that stuff has been smashed together like this for so long, you might peel it apart and find there's mold in there. Yeah. You don't want to throw that on top of your bed without a covering at least between your bedding and that thing. Yep. Or maybe, I don't know, an army tarp or something. I don't know.
Beds again are difficult because they are usually a little lower, and that's why I love those tables. But I wanted to say that I would love for people to imagine, this is what I would do if I was with you, right? You're pulling stuff out of the closet and you're going, oh, look, it's Grandpa's. And I'm like, don't think about it. Put it in the box. Nope, don't look at it. Nope, we don't care. Put it in the box. Nope, it doesn't matter. Put it in the box. And that's what I do frankly, it only takes like 10 minutes then. Seriously, it's out. You clean it. And then bit by bit, as you're looking at it, obviously there's some coaching that goes on too, but that's where you become your best coach too, of considering the possibilities of, do I love it? If so, where would it want to live? What use does it have? Does it need sub-containerizing? One of the things that I noticed looking at the closet photos.
Ooh, let's pull these up. So, okay, this is a good segue. Laura Engstrom was kind enough to send along some images. I'm going to share screen and show you one of these and then the other. This is image number 1, we'll call it. Closet number 1.
Excellent.
How many of you can relate to this closet? How many of you have something along these lines? Anyone? Laura Lukes is like, nope, not in my life, I don't. Laura is a little bit wired up like you.
Oh, fun.
Laura Lukes is. And Laura Engstrom, let me find you and get you to describe, tell us a little bit of the story behind this closet, if you would. Wait a second. Here we go.
Okay. Can you guys hear me?
I can. I'm going to try to figure out a way that I can see you. I have to stop sharing the screen for just 1 sec so I can come back and find sharing the speaker view. Okay. Got it. Yes, I can hear you, and Andrea can hear you.
All right. So hi, everybody. So that is my closet. I had just finished helping my daughter organize her closet. So I should have probably showed you her happy place. And then this is our guest room. This was our shame hole, and everything's now, the whole room was filled with stuff. And now it's just a corner. So we've got stuff to a corner now, but I still it's like I got tired. So I lost my motivation. This is beginning of COVID. And then I just sort of pushed everything. I just I lost my motivation. I got tired. And then that first one is just me. We were out of town. So I just started dumping my clothes in the closet because someone was coming over. So just whatever, just throw it in my closet to hide it. So it's a perfect hiding space.
Yeah.
So that's, in sum, those are my 2 shame holes.
I totally understand. I have a closet that looks a lot like that in my house right now. Don't tell Andrea.
Say, I'm curious, Pilar, are they able to see both pictures
Are you guys-
simultaneously?
I think they can just see this picture with the blue, and then this one, I don't know. I think I have to share that separately.
Okay, no worries. Well, let's start with that one with the blue. What I wanted to point out that's right, I think, and super helpful is what we call like sub-containerization or structure, right? So there are those bins on the top shelf that even if what's inside of them may actually be kind of a chaotic mix, that at least visually, I mean, it's a little cleaner, especially over your head like that, which can be kind of oppressive. But functionally, you could take it down and look at it too, and stuff's less likely to just come cascading down on you. And you can see also there's the filing cabinet. There's another bin up on the shelf. There's it looks like kind of a photo box. So those are the things that we would just want to employ more of as we're putting things back, going, what things need some structure that would allow, a label to go on. So I go, that's this category of stuff so that when you want it, you can go get it. And folks, I keep shoe boxes all the time. And those are often my first solution in my life and with my clients' life. And then you can go replace it if you want to with some pretty little item, from some store. But often you don't even know how big that category of stuff is until you have it all together. And so I really recommend, waiting to set up systems until you've got like things together. Often when I'm decluttering a space with somebody, we'll do more of what I was referring to before, kind of a search and rescue. And I'll say, okay, let's get all of the books, put all the books together, all the shoes go together, all the, compact discs, whatever your category of stuff, so that you can go, oh, this is how many I have. That's also, I think, part of Marie Kondo's method is that she wants you to realize just how much blooming stuff you have of that category. You go, wow, I didn't know. I didn't realize I was keeping that much yarn for knitting or whatever your thing was. So getting, like things together is very powerful for both of those reasons. The other photo, well, you can see in this picture, there's hanging closet space that's not being used for hanging clothes, which is fine. One could add more shelves if you're like, hey, I don't really need that for clothing. That might be worth doing. A lot of people will want to use clear bins. I hear this all the time. They say, because I want to be able to see what's in them. And the problem is, okay, yeah, I guess you can tell there's shoes in there, for example. But a lot of the time, stuff is so mashed up against the edge, like you're still kind of going, what is that? And it's, again, just one more de-energizing, confusing moment. So I feel like having bins that are solid and then labeled very clearly is much better. Color coding, it turns out, is the quickest thing our brain recognizes. So, for example, I have Rubbermaid bins that I use for decluttering, and I also have some that are for my seasonal clothing. Those are green, and the other ones are all gray. So if I ever come across a green bin, I know it's my seasonal clothing bin. That's just as an example. But again, you can use labels that are color coded. I find this is a really quick way. You can also add a label, obviously, with a word. But some people also, many of you might be living with somebody and you're trying to also help a partner or kids use a system. And again, for some people, color is going to be much more relatable more quickly than words.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask a question, a thought about this? One of the tensions that often comes up in decision making in a space like this is the goal to fit as much stuff in an organized way into that closet, or is the goal to figure out how much of that stuff do I keep and how much of that stuff goes before I try to find all the containers and get it? Because I can see like, hey, Laura's got all kinds of room in there for shelves that she hasn't even thought of yet, and bins she hasn't even.
Go get more stuff.
Yeah. How would you counsel her to inquire, what does she do first? Mm-hmm. Is this the moment where the rest of that stuff now comes out of that closet into additional, if they aren't already in bins, and then the bins get stacked along the side of the room while she starts putting them one at a time up on her folding table or her ironing board, and doing that sorting job into the bins that you described previously that are labeled like giveaway, rehome. We didn't talk about that. The category of rehoming, which Andrea introduced to me, there's stuff you're getting rid of, and then there's stuff you're keeping that's going to have to be rehomed within your own home. Like it needs a new location. It doesn't belong in the closet, or maybe there's a better closet for it. But where does it go? And there's decisions that need to be made about that that you don't want to be making right then. You just know it's not here; it's somewhere else.
Yeah, and my disseminate and other rooms category is kind of that. But you bring up something important, which is, okay, I can look at a certain item and go, oh yeah, this goes in the kitchen drawer. Oh yeah, this belongs in the basement. It belongs in another system that already exists. But in the process of doing something like this, like I can see in the second photo, and not important for you guys to see it necessarily, but there's a lot of like bedding, it looks like, and blankets and things that are on the floor. And so one might go, oh gosh, I actually have a lot of this, and oh, I like it. And oh, it would be useful for, hey, when we're going on a trip in the camper, or when friends are coming over for the guest bedroom, or whatever your systems might be. But in the process, you might be like, it doesn't actually belong here. And that's a rehome category where you would then be thinking like, yeah, what is its new home? And what's the appropriate container, again, that would keep it dust-free, identifiable, mildew-free. We think through all those things. Easy to carry if it's something you're moving around, easy on your wrists and your body parts. But I do think one of the great challenges when you're taking on, say either of these closets, is you're pulling out a fair bit of stuff. And as we were saying, ideally, you need some containment to be able to put it in as you're creating categories of things that you'll want to go back in. So, again, it might be crafts, it might be bedding, it might be seasonal clothing, and you may not know how much you have. If you've got a pretty big room, you could even kind of, make some piles, but that's not ideal.
Can I ask a question about this? So we're looking at another picture now. And Laura, you want to tell us the story about this one?
So this one is this is actually just my closet, and it's a dumping ground. And I like what you're saying, because it is annoying. Those blankets there are just blankets from our house, and I never have enough. And everyone's dirty laundry goes in my closet for some reason. So I'm thinking that has to be a new space, because I'm always stepping over dirty clothes to get to my to try to get ready for the day. So just hearing you talk about that, I'm like, I never thought about that, but those blankets are an annoyance, and I need to find a new place for it. I also was thinking too, as I'm listening to you, what type of container, I know you said you like the bins. I have like that. I'm probably going to get rid of that black thing. It's like a fabric file cabinet that I just dump stuff in. I'm not one to fold. I don't really like folding, things I'll fold my t-shirts and things like that, but like underwear, things, I just throw it in a bin, so like, do you use bins for that kind of thing, or what solutions do you have for that? I'm curious.
I want to just add another note before Andrea responds, because you're opening up an interesting category of things I always think of you talking about: hardscaping. In landscaping, there's like hardscaping, and then there's the softscaping. There's the stuff like there's going to be a sculpture here and a water feature there, and there's a walkway that goes through this way. And hardscaping was something that absolutely changed my approach to everything, from packing to organizing my car, even like groceries and things in my refrigerator. Talk just a little bit about that, like creating the structure that is going to live there, not just bins for storage, but what are the right receptacles for organizing the space for stuff that comes in and goes out all the time?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I do think some of it is highly personal. And it, of course, also depends on the type of stuff. But I have witnessed people have systems that really do de-energize them. It's, again, a cheap kind of fabric little dresser from IKEA or Target or something that every time you open or close the door, you've got to like fuss with it. And that is such a waste of our life force. And I think it makes us more likely to be irritated when the third thing happens that day that doesn't go right or what have you. And so as I heard you talk about your pathway and kind of having to step all over that, I was like, I got so excited about the idea of you just streaming in and to do your thing, to get dressed for the day. And you'll see some of that. We go over some of that in that closet Order Out of Chaos episode that Pilar's talking about. And that's a video episode. And you get to see us go through some of these exact same questions, including what type of hangers to use. I'm very partial to wooden hangers because they don't bend and break and they don't stress your wrist the same way. I don't mind plastic ones for lightweight things. I I love, by the way, Laura, that you actually have a closet with receptive space. I am so used to seeing people fight to get a piece of clothing in or out, and literally get like wrist and shoulder issues from it. So, that's just lovely. But I do think having hangers of all like a similar type is really peaceful for the eye, and then your body when you're hanging things up. So that's just one example of a small change that one could do just that. You could just rehang your hangers, and it's a great one to have a friend help with, actually.
Another thing that you said to me years ago, or maybe counseled me to do, was to rethink would one big storage container with, say, a bigger dresser with drawers with a countertop height be better than a series of many small containers? Stacking a stacker on top of a stacker on top of a box and having that whole thing be kind of wiggly. Yeah. That same toleration problem of feeling like this is, every time I go in there, I'm a little bit etsy-ketsy about what's going to happen.
Yeah, and you feel that. You're kind of like, Yeah, and we covered that, I think, in that closet episode too, but this again applies to so many parts of our life. I see in general in rooms, a lot of times people have just added that next piece of furniture until things are shoulder to shoulder. And, again, maybe it's the thing that we had from our college days added on to another thing we went and got from IKEA, and it's all kind of rickety and not strong or solid. And we notice that. We feel when we're coming into contact with solidity and ease. And so noticing, Pilar has a great phrase that I love, which is noticing your tolerations.
I got that from Thomas Leonard, but I just think that's a great term.
I love it. Like that thing you're like, I'm tolerating this stuck drawer or whatever it might be. So a lot of it, again, will begin with just noticing. Noticing precedes change, and then evaluating, what would for you be a greater kind of space. And it might be that it's something bigger or something smaller. Maybe it'd be better for you to have things with small drawers where the underwear and the bras and the socks all have their own separate space, and you're not digging through and having to feel like they're getting involved. I too, as a child, and actually even as an adult, have done what Marie Kondo says she did as a kid and even recommends now. We have this in common, which was we would cut pieces of cardboard to subdivide drawers to keep things together and contained. So my underwear, basically same as you, Laura. I toss them in my underwear drawer, and that's where they are, and I pick through what I want for the day, and it's very easeful for me. So.
And that idea, I think, of like with like is really helpful. The mind has to think less, when the underwear with the underwear and the socks are with the socks. I always feel like my life goes through a kind of mingling, where things start getting mixed up together. I open a drawer that's supposed to have underwear and it's got socks and underwear, and I'm like, okay, if I want to keep pace, preemptive repair, this is a project for 10 minutes. It doesn't need to take my whole life. It doesn't need to be a huge, big deal. But to take time when I have it, this is a puttering example of something you could do on an ultradian rhythm break. It doesn't take a lot of mental energy to say, is this underwear or is this socks? You can do that on an ultradian rhythm break. You can go to your silverware drawer and go, is this a serving utensil or an eating utensil? I can do that,
It's such a fun energy hit too. I mean, I get that I'm like some sort of weird addict probably in this way, but I do think it's exciting. It's a little quick, immediate feedback of success. And then the next time you go back, you're like, yeah. So one example too, for people who maybe aren't dealing with huge overwhelm of spaces, but you still feel like, gosh, I'd like to do some refinement. And a very simple example would be socks. Maybe you're somebody who you're either going out running and you need those little ankle things, or you're somebody who's wearing some really heavy wool socks because the rest of the day that's what you live in. You might want to have 2 small drawers for those, or a division at least, so you're not constantly picking through one to get through the other. And again, I think of this all as like basically valuing our own life force so highly that it's worth doing that. Some people will be like, that's crazy. Why would you spend time doing that? I'm like, actually, because it makes me more peaceful. It makes me more joyful and actually more efficient. Now, when I want to go get dressed to do a thing, that's not the best use of my energy, is making that choice every time.
Yeah. Another thing Andrea offered me, and Laura, maybe this is useful to you looking at the closet, is thinking about frequency of use. and the amount of real estate that something at the front of a closet has versus the back of the closet. Like what you use the most often, what you need the quickest, the most quickly on a given basis. What needs to be within easy reach, and what could you afford to have a couple steps back? And I think it would be really interesting to look at that closet with a view to how much of this is my stuff that I want access to on a given basis? How much of this is my family's stuff that I'm storing for them, but that they don't need every day? Or blankets that are used when guests come over, but that happens once a year? Does it have the right amount of real estate and the right actual real estate given its current use? And that's another level of kind of deciding once you have everything out and you know what you're keeping, you're going to get rid of some stuff potentially, and that may create more space. But then as you're putting it back in comes this decision about what goes where. Would you talk a little bit about that?
I refer to prime real estate as anything kind of from knee to shoulders. That anything above there is harder and then below there is a little harder. And so whether it's your kitchen cupboards or your closet and where you're keeping it, I think keeping that in mind, because I think people get the wrong idea that clutter refers to something we've got to get rid of. And I actually feel like clutter is sometimes that, and often it's just the thing that's living in the wrong place. I still remember this woman who had all this memorabilia from her grandfather, and it was like on her whole dresser top. And I assumed he had just like passed away and this was like a temporary thing. No, it had landed there for like a decade. And I'm like, this is prime real estate. We want this fresh, accessible, receptive. You should be able to set down your tea mug here as you're getting dressed. And that brings me to another topic that we have talked about before, which is receptive space. And that importance of having enough space to put down a thing or to hang another piece of clothing, or in the case of, say, an entryway, which we were discussing before starting tonight, as being a really powerful place to start if you aren't super energized by something else, that especially if people are going to be coming over, etc., to have receptive space where a couple of people, you can hang their coats or their boots can land where they're not, in the footpath, or they can set down their purse or, their car keys, a gift for you, for example, a bottle of wine that they've just brought. And so when you're looking at your entryway and other spaces, using that principle of receptive space is wonderful. And, from a feng shui standpoint, we would also say, if you want abundance, if you want blessings to flow into your life, if, again, the space is so full, it's kind of energetically saying not available. And the front door to your home, and by the way, in feng shui, we really mean the actual architectural front door, which I know not everybody, especially in the Midwest, uses. If you go through your garage all the time, I'd recommend using your front door once in a while. And we call that the mouth of qi. It's the mouth and the part of your home that takes in the breath of life, but also, again, all the blessings, all the energy. So if you've been struggling with energy level, if you've been struggling with abundance, with enough helpful people in your life, no matter where that front door shows up, that's a wonderful place to attend to and to make it easeful to come in. So go outside and come in your own front door and see what the experience is like. I've a number of times gotten hit in the heel by somebody's door, and they're like, oh yeah, it always does that. And I'm like, no, do not tolerate this. We're starting with that. You get the idea. You see it when somebody else comes through or you pretend to be a new person, you might get some excitement about what to do there and what changes to make.
Another thing, just to underline that receptive space thing, I think I have found that that's true even in like closets. You've talked to me about this in drawers. If there's no room to take something out and put it down while you look for something else, or to take every time you're putting something in, you're having to shove it in or cram it in or pull this way.
Life is hard.
Life feels hard, yeah. And, if you're holding a cup of coffee and you go to do something and you need both hands and there's no place to put the cup of coffee, there's this moment of like, oh crap, I have to go over here to put the coffee down. And now you're wasting time and energy and where did I put the coffee? You start walking around the house looking for that thing. So there's a grace and a graciousness that comes from having a little additional space. A little room for breath. Laura, one of the things I would love to know is, Andrea, how would you just approach this project? If you were sitting with Laura and you're like, okay, let's take on one closet, would you pull everything out of the closet and then go from there?
Yeah, I mean, number one, and you'll see this on the handout that you'll get, it really recommends before you actually do anything, it's about the time of day that you pick, turning off your phone, making sure you have enough energy, putting on tennis shoes. Do not do this barefoot in your floppy slippers. Maybe you want to light incense, put on great tunes, draw boundaries. Again, tell people I'm unavailable. So it's about really supporting yourself to be energized and to keep going as long as you've decided to need to, or that you want to. And it is important to be able to stop when you're tired. And maybe it's just a pause and you get that fresh cup of tea or coffee or whatever, and you come back.
90 minutes. 90 minutes is as long as you can do anything before
Yeah.
you ready.
And I do that with my people. We'll stop, we'll get a bite of chocolate, we'll go outside and look at their bird feeders, come back in, whatever it might be. But yeah, in the case of a closet that has either no structure or so little and that it's out of date, like it really doesn't apply anymore, I would absolutely pull everything out. I would make sure before you do so that, again, there is receptive space in that room, ideally, to pull it out in boxes and then sort it. If there isn't, number one, you might decide to start in the room proper instead, or you would then have to set up your system, say, in the hallway or the next room and pull all of those things, say, into the living room on one side. I usually go left to right. I think that's kind of normal for people, but whatever. Pull it all to one side, set up your system, and then one box at a time or bin comes up on your table and you start there. And by the way, it is okay and valuable sometimes to have an I'm not sure yet category. You can't put everything in there, but sometimes there's something that you're just a little conflicted about and you're not really 100% ready to make a decision. Our mom has a phrase, if it's not a yes, it's a no. And it's super helpful, but sometimes people get stuck in, but it's a yes and a no. So you might set it in a I need to decide later category. Another thing I wanted to put out there quickly, especially for people who live with others, is one of the sticking points is when you can't get other people to decide, or they're constantly saying, well, no, I need that, I want that, but they won't really participate and be responsible and make a choice. And I've often done declutterings when the other partner was not there. And what we do is we create like the Ask Dave box, for example, and that allows us to put, again, not waste our energy, but to also console the other person that we're being respectful. It didn't get thrown away. It's not getting hidden somewhere. And so when they're like, what'd you do with my whatever? And they're panicking because we all have that. You can go, oh, it's in that box or those 3 boxes or what have you. And again, I do buy Banker's boxes by the case. I get them from Quill Corporation. But you want the kind that have, like a removable lid. And it's really handy because you can stack those things 4 high and all along a wall if you need to do this piece by piece without it, again, taking over your foot space. The last thing you want is 10, 20 different shaped bins all sitting on the floor and all tipping over, and you just feel like you can't move without it all toppling on you.
This is a kind of technical question, but if I get all these Banker boxes and I go into Laura's closet and I pull all the things out into the Banker's boxes, I can just put those stacked Banker boxes on the left, have my sorting table in the middle, and then be sorting the things into categories, also into Banker boxes, but those are labeled.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
And then I figure out what to do. I'm going to end up with more empty boxes over here on the left that I can move to the right if
Correct.
I need to for storage or
and this
whatever.
is assuming that you probably will be doing decluttering ongoing, which most people will. I mean, occasionally, if you've been doing this for years and years, you will get to a place where it's more like what I call just weeding. So if I go into my silverware drawer, I've got something that I'm like, I don't use this anymore. It's out of here. Blah, blah, blah. But we've come up with a new thing that we've bought. And I'm like, yeah, my drawer is full. Is this going to replace the other thing we used to use more? Okay, it's out of here. That's weeding, and it's really easy. And I always have a bag or box that's basically a donate box going. And, everyone knows, throw it in the donate box. So, if you're not at the weeding stage, then by all means, think about investing in a system. I mean, I suppose if you got 2 tables and a carton of Banker boxes, you're probably in that sort of $130 range, I suppose. Something like that.
And you can do this again and again, and you can move, roaming through your house like a healthy deviant might, looking for where the UDR is showing up in your home. Laura, is that helpful? Is a starting place? I just realized I took my earphone out. Here we go. Thanks.
Yes, it is very much so. I mean, actually, I'm excited because I'm off tomorrow, so I will keep you guys posted. Yes. But I'm gonna at least start. I will be starting tomorrow, and I like the idea of, I do have some tables, so I don't even have to buy the tables. Perfect. So it's just the boxes, and then trying to figure out. Yeah, I guess it's just not thinking about it too much too, I guess. I'm wondering, I feel like sometimes it's just the action, just having to do it and not overthink it.
And I think that's brilliant. And I also love that you have some time off. I think people sometimes try to squeeze this in between things and aren't prepared for the fact that either they might feel really tired and need a reboot, or they might feel really energized and want to keep going. And so I always tell people, don't plan anything like the day after we're doing decluttering, or certainly don't plan dinner plans that night, to give yourself that freedom. And then another thing I offer you, those of you especially who are scared of this, or when you do start it, you're like, God, this is really hard. It's slow. I've had people say this. So like, it took me an hour to do one drawer. At that rate, I won't finish my house until I'm 85. And I'm like, it doesn't work like that, actually, because I say it's like the way a river happens. Some droplets fall and you start getting this trickle that starts a riverbed. And eventually that riverbed is actually collecting more water, and on and on. And that is truly how it is. People become more efficient, more decisive. I'd love to tell a brief little story about someone I worked with. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we got time. I'll never forget this lesson, because I'd never experienced it at quite this level with somebody. But I had this woman call because she wanted help with her basement. And she lived in a side-by-side duplex she rented. She was never planning on moving, though. She made that clear. That was important. And her basement had flooded. And so the upside of that was, as we did her basement, a lot of the stuff that was on the floor were bags of clothes that she had wanted to donate, which unfortunately, lesson number 1 here, by the way, went into her basement instead of right away into her car, which is the other thing, is make time to get that bye-bye stuff out of your life. So that was kind of easy. Well, then we got into organizing the shelves, and there was this whole wall of shelves that had all these tiny, Target grocery shopping bags on them. And I was like, so, what's in there? And she's like, oh, a lot of collectibles, and some of them were my mom's and stuff. And I was like, okay. And I'm thinking, well, we should definitely find some fodder to get rid of here, because she's not going to want to keep all this. And so we unpacked every single bag. And in each bag were tiny little figurines, each one individually wrapped. And I kind of had this sinking feeling as I was doing this, where thinking, God, we're wasting time. At some point I was like, oh, she actually isn't going to get rid of anything, because she started out by saying, oh, isn't this one adorable? Isn't this one cute? And I'm like, yeah, that is really cute. And then I started saying, do you like this one better than any of the ones that are upstairs? Knowing she's not planning on moving. There will be no more new space. No. I'm like, okay. And so we go along. Oh, isn't it adorable? Do you like this one better than? No. So it went on like this. So at the end of the day, we packed them all back up, and on the shelves they went. Meantime, my repeat comment to her, besides, would you want it upstairs, was, somebody would love this. This would be someone's favorite whatchamajiggy. So she calls me 6 months later and she says, I'm ready to take on the shelves. And I'm like, really? And again, I just don't want her to spend a bunch of money and time to have me come and have her go, isn't this cute? She got rid of every single item. We had to unpack every single item. Isn't this cute? Yes, it is. She goes, someone will love it. Donate. Isn't this cute? Yes, it is. Someone will love it, she says. Donate. And I have a photo of all of these bags lined up at the conveyor belt in Goodwill in St. Paul. I wish our Goodwill had a conveyor belt, because it was such an amazing image. There were 20, Target grocery shopping bags with little figurines. It was incredible. And so that lesson to me of how things shift inside of us is very powerful, and that you trust the process, do the piece that feels energizing now. Yeah, don't go into shame. Mm-hmm. Did she have to get rid of all of mom's figurines then? No, she didn't. I mean, they were on a shelf that wasn't hurting her in that sense. It was stagnant energy, sure, but it wasn't all in her bedroom or, on her kitchen counter or in her living room behind the couch. So
Well, this brings up an interesting point. We talk in Healthy Deviant You about, looking at things through fresh eyes and going through your home like a tourist, and being like, who lives here? If this were an Airbnb and you're renting the place out, what would other people make of your stuff? What is the story of you that is being told by and in your space? And it's, sometimes it is kind of mortifying. It's like, oh, this is the story of an overwhelmed person. A person who's half out of their mind by the unhealthy default reality, a person who can no longer make decisions, a person who hasn't had any time to make decisions. And it's worth looking at that part of yourself, the story of yourself as told by your space, with compassion and with interest and curiosity, not with shame and loathing. There's always a learner question to be asked. How did this get here? Is this serving me? What would happen if I had this space back? Those kinds of questions. So Andrea, I want to shift gears a little bit, and feel free if anybody has questions that they want to have addressed that are specific to a conundrum, like an inherited storage, stuff that you have got from someone else, something you want to keep but your partner not ready to let go of, the thing you're fighting through every day but you can't get rid of because you're going to need it someday, whatever it is. Please feel free to add that in the chat. Lorraine has a question about any advice for sentimental items like old photographs, children's artwork, awards, trophies, collections, etc.
Well, of course, part of that is it yours or someone else's? We have a phrase too in decluttering that says basically take care of your own, and that often will inspire people to deal with theirs. And again, I have some amazing stories that I won't share here, but it's been proven and it's really, really fun. And at the very least, it may reduce your stress and about your own. Again, that's a very special category that I think requires the right time and the right energy to feel what you're feeling about the stuff. And I find usually it involves often having to ask other people, especially if it's anything familial, either from your ancestors or you're now thinking, would my kids want this? And so I recommend having a notebook of like people that you're going to call, ask Bobby if he wants the such and so on. An example of one solution was a woman who down in the basement had Grandpa's meat grinder. And I asked, do you make sausages and things? She's like, no, but we all have this very vivid and attached memory of Grandpa doing this. And so I said, I would check with your various other family members, but if nobody wants it, I would take a photo of it. And then I would find a place to donate it that's energizing to you. Because again, objects mostly really want to be used. And so that's another, again, someone would love it thing that can help motivate us to move something on that has an emotional attachment. I've also witnessed for a lot of people, it was the telling the story about the thing that then allowed them to move it on. And so to me, they did the story to me, but it might be like, hey, getting your kids all over and saying, hey, I want to talk about grandma's stuff, and then I'm going to get rid of anything that you don't want or what have you. So I think honoring those emotional parts of it are really important. I find it really interesting that people often keep things, but keep them in the ways that don't actually honor the stuff, So it's, again, the box of photos or whatever, family photos that are in the basement getting mildewy and so on. And so I feel like, again, I don't want to go to shame here, but more like just kind of getting honest with oneself and personal responsibility of like, hey, if I'm going to keep that stuff, if I say it's valuable, then it's worth me carving out the time to address how to keep it in a way that A, protects it, but also maybe B, allows us to access it if we ever want to review those things. So if I want to say, hey, I'm going to bring those photos out. I did a sort of all my photos at one point, finally many years ago. And now I have more to do. But this was pre-digital, and I got a bunch of shoe boxes, and I labeled them travel or family or black and white childhood, etc. And I literally just sorted like a card dealer. By the way, good thing I got the big trash can because there were so many. There's the doubles back then. There's the ones where I looked ugly. I'm like, I don't even want this floating around. And then there's the people I didn't recognize. I'm like, I have no idea who that is. I did come away with a small stack of ones that I wanted to send to people. I very dutifully wrote their name on a piece of paper and folded over and paper clipped it. And 5 years later came across all those same things I had not followed up. I threw them away. I gave myself permission. I'm like, I'm no longer someone who sends Christmas cards, and I'm apparently not going to mail these out either. So I tossed them. I was like, well, but another category as an example that helps with that is things to repair. When I was going through my house during my big sort, I mean, I through a year's period went through every drawer, and that was what I would do. I couldn't wait to get home from work. This is when I still worked at the university. I'd be like, oh, one more drawer. And so I had my system set up, but I always came across things that were broken that I really wanted to fix. And so for a while I put them out, on the kitchen counter like you do. And then I was like, well, this is dumb. Now I've got broken stuff all over sitting here and there. So I finally got a banker's box. I labeled it repair items. I put every time I came across a new one, I put it all in there. And 2 years later, I came across it in my attic and I was like, okay. And I sat down with some glue. I fixed the things I was going to fix. And a couple things I think I took to someone who could repair them, and I tossed a bunch. But it was so much clearer looking at them all in one place. And in the meantime, they didn't harass my visual space for 2 years. So there's just, again, some of that's just noticing what you're doing and going, wait a minute. Yeah.
Amplified awareness. Yeah. That's,
I
go ahead.
mentioned something else you said that really hit me when she was talking about kind of, again, the healthy, deviant way of doing this is noticing how you got here, but not feeling shame, but just that honest, like, how did this happen? And sometimes it's, people, I always say like, hey, if you've been raising kids, say no more, working a job, going to grad school, taking care of an elderly parent, you've maybe had an illness. I mean, a lot of people have dealt with those in a layered way. It's inevitable that, it's like a garden. It is just going to get out of control. But if we want to be somebody who attends to these things and is really loving up our space, then we need to create receptive space in our calendar. And that may mean saying no to something that isn't a yes. So I started doing that mom's little mantra, if it isn't a yes, it's a no, really helped me, because someone would say, oh, do you want to have lunch? And I'd be like, well, yeah, I could, which is really different than like, oh, that's exactly what I want to do. And so that has been the only way I've started to create time in my calendar that was always full, and everything kept getting pushed to the sides.
Yeah, that's great. The other counsel, I think, which, you've offered a lot of folks around sentimental things, particularly things like children's artwork, or the stuff that you had, awards from when you were whatever, to really think about like, what is the one that really represents the essence, or the two or the three? If you have 50, thinking about it in terms of like, is there 10% of it that is like must keep for right now? And the other part, it's like, this is another version of, my kid drawing the Transformers. Like there's 5 million of them, and it was fun for them to draw it. And now,
which is the best one.
Yeah. Yes. Which is the best one.
Which also is not only, of course, about creating more space so you're not storing as much stuff, but will also make that which you keep more poignant. Mm-hmm. It has more energy. It gives you more energy back. Yeah. It's an exciting place from which to sort.
Well, we were decluttering some of our ancestral stuff, like things that were in people's dowries when they came from Germany in 1895. And some of the stuff is like, these kinds of, they're not recreatable. No one is hand tatting this kind of stuff anymore. And it seemed wrong to throw it away. It seemed wrong to like put it in a Goodwill bag where, you never knew if anybody would, it probably is going to end up in the recycling bin. But it was interesting noticing some of them were just much better than others. And some of them were more beautiful than others. Some of them spoke to one of us, but not the other. And so there is that kind of like a hierarchy to, and Andrea can say more about it, but I want a couple of things. Yes. Anna says, when my girlfriend and I went through her closet to organize, she would say to the items, thank you for your service, and let it go into the appropriate bin. Yes. That's really nice. I like that too. Like, someone will love it. Yes. Thank you for your service.
That's such an important part of it, is that gratitude piece, because then you are more full. It is easier to give the thing away. And I really believe, again, that relationship with the objects thing is powerful. I love that.
Can I ask another tactical question? Mm-hmm. When you're going through one by one, so this is back to the beginning, Andrea's sort of the structural philosophy is you take one thing at a time and you decide, do you belong in which of these labeled boxes, or do I need a different label for something? There's no appropriate category. at the end of the day, you're going to end up with these boxes with all of your stuff that you used to think you were keeping or you just didn't make a decision about. And you now look at this box that's like going to the Goodwill, and you look in there and you're like, oh, there's some good stuff in there. Mm-hmm. How do you avoid taking the things back out or going like, this is far too nice? Is there a redistribution category of like the thing you have second thoughts of, or shouldn't be Goodwill, it should be in the give to, rehome with my sister or whatever. What about that kind of at the end of a session when you're already at the end of your ultradian peak, you've gone into the trough and now you're trying to second guess yourself? Any counsel for like, is that a good time to just like pause as opposed to begin reissuing the assignments?
Yeah, well, I've read that people who lose a lot of weight actually sometimes feel uncomfortable and want to gain the weight back. And
I wrote a whole article about that called Reframing Your Body Reframed.
And so, I often say about yoga that part of what we're doing is practicing becoming comfortable and staying present with that which is uncomfortable versus just responding until we're comfortable, just going away from the edge. And so just recognizing that for some people, say going through just the objects that might be in one closet will be enough to make us very uncomfortable. For some people, it's getting rid of, all the rubber bands because they've been collecting rubber bands, that whole kind of depression era thing, right? So it's really different for different people. But sitting with the discomfort and noticing, I think what it's about is really important. And yet not acting when you're tired, not just starting to, again, go through and pull things out. A couple of things. I'm very much that way. I'm very energized by knowing if I'm getting rid of something that's really good, that knowing that someone else is going to value it. And so I've got two thoughts about that. One is sometimes it is about actually finding that right place to give it to. I have witnessed over and over again people, the thing they were holding close, that when I finally helped them think about which place or people would find a deep need for that, they were all of a sudden excited about getting rid of it. So some of it's just figuring that out, talking to friends, your church, whoever. But the other piece is letting your imagination work for you and say, if I do let this move on to Goodwill, etc., somebody, again, will love it. And I often say, look, a lot of my favorite things are somebody else's grandma's that they got rid of. It was her china that they didn't want to use that are my favorite plates that I use every day. And so just, I think, a willingness to have those conversations or, especially if you've got someone in your life who can have those conversations with you in a way that isn't overly forceful or shaming, and they're not going to force your hand too quickly, but can kind of brainstorm with you, can be very, very helpful. You do have to be careful about engaging people to help you because sometimes they are very invested in just making it all happen. They're like, we're going to do this.
Yeah, it's a blend of determination and gentleness, I think you have to have.
Yes.
So we have just a little time left, and I want to address a couple issues around prioritizing these projects. How do you know which to take on first? Is it what's bugging you most, or what you think you have energy to do, or what other people will be impressed by, or, how do you go about advising someone if you can only take on one space or a hierarchy of spaces, how to decide?
That is actually, I remember when I first started teaching decluttering classes, and I was so glad I figured this out. I mean, I just sort of invented it myself, but I asked, I want each of you to think about what is your clutter costing you? And it was really fun in a group because most people would be willing to say, and it's everything from time, to frustration, to terror, deep anxiety, fighting with family members, it can be super, super intense, the cost of it. And then in order to motivate people, and I always ask this when I'm doing a decluttering one-on-one, what is the payoff that you're looking for? Because we can use that when we get stuck to be our go-to, right? So why am I doing this? It's uncomfortable. It's messy. I'm dusty. I'm dirty. I could have been outside. It's a gorgeous day. What is the payoff? And that's often what will bring us back to it.
Can I say something about that? So this reminds me a little bit of that there's that Venn diagram that we have in Healthy Deviant You. There's the world of healthy choices, there's the personal goals and priorities that you have, and then there's what you're energized to do now. This place where those things overlap, that like, this is important to me priority wise, it's a good beneficial thing to do that's going to be healthy, happy for my space. And I have available energy to do this now. Whereas the other thing, it's all good, but God, going into that basement, I just can't, don't start with the basement then, start with the thing you have. Maybe it is a bedside table. So and I like that idea of what's it costing me, because I do think sometimes it's this feeling of like it's a bad thing, but sometimes like I would otherwise have a place to do yoga or my morning minutes practice. I could use this space for this project that is lighting me up, or to enjoy some time in my otherwise busy life that I could reclaim for myself. Yeah.
Well, right. And what is your space saying to you is sometimes the cost. And we've talked before about your bedroom being a really profound place to start this work, because, the last thing you see before you go to bed might be your bedside table, and it might be the first thing you interact with, or maybe it's what we call your vision wall, which is when you're in bed looking, straight ahead. A lot of people might have a dresser there that might be, heaped with things, or maybe you've got a piece of artwork that's you don't even love, and it just got hung crookedly on the nail that was there when you moved in, right? Like, what is your space saying? And what we'd love, of course, is for it to say, you can do this, life is beautiful, you're healthy, take a deep breath. So,
it's all going to be okay.
It's all going to be okay. So having, little things and stuff that would contain dust or whatever in drawers, and just having, your glass of water, your alarm clock, if you will, your Kleenex, but maybe also if you have space, an item of beauty. Maybe it's not on the bedside table, maybe it's on that dresser in front of you. Having, again, receptive space to take your clothes off. Everybody in our family has like the half dirty clothes chair, because you're taking off your clothes, but they're not dirty. You might wear them again tomorrow. You've got your jammies, just thinking about what would support you from not having stuff on the floor, not feeling visually overwhelmed, all of that. Yeah. The bedroom's powerful.
I was just you mentioned defend with beauty, and that was something I think I talked about in HDU at some point. I can't remember where. Can you explain about what that means? Like, once you've decluttered a place and you have clear space, how do you keep it from accumulating clutter again?
Yeah. If it's a horizontal surface, it's obviously finding something to set there that I call kind of like the hub of the wheel. It's what holds the space and marks the space as somewhere you're not going to land a bunch of junk, or if you do, that it lands there very briefly and you whisk it away to where it belongs. And I have a super exciting, very quick story about that. A woman hired me who had 3, I think, little girls, and the whole house was really overwhelming for all the reasons that we've discussed. But she said, that often her husband, they would bring a drill up to the bedroom to hang a piece of artwork or whatever, and it would land on the dresser and it never left unless she moved it. And in fact, there were videotapes and everything just on every surface. And so we talked about this principle, and I said, we put a lot of things in the Ask Dave box, by the way. And then I said, what do you think could go on the dresser? And we discussed different ideas, a candle, it might be fake flowers. I am a proponent of those when they're really beautiful and they can be kept dust free and they've got life force, all kinds of options. Maybe it's a sculpture or a favorite object. But I just said, I'm going to leave you with that. And I got this card like 4 months later, I think, that said that she and her husband talked about it. They went to IKEA or somewhere together and got a beautiful vase and put like a bowl and put stones in it and a candle in the center. And that ever since then, nothing has landed there for more than an hour or something. It's because he had his hands full, or she had her hands full. And then she talked about how her daughters all wanted to do their bedrooms after that. And it had become this family-wide excitement. Yeah. And
it's so true. I think, one side effect of that defend with beauty strategy, this is true even in closets where you might not think beauty is an issue, right? But when you create the space and you have that centerpiece or that kind of resolving object taking center field in a place that could just become littered with gunge otherwise, suddenly you start noticing the spaces in your life that are not defended and that are accumulating. And you're like, your standard changes from not just it's not cluttered, but it's beautiful. It's actually lovely. So this brings me to one final thing I want to cover, and then we'll go back to questions for the next few minutes. We'll go till about 7:30 if people are interested, which is about 10 minutes from now. One important area that you can declutter right now. You mentioned bedside tables as an option. We've talked a little bit about entryways as another option, a good kind of usually a manageable space. There's another one that feels like it feels part of that trio.
Dining room table.
Ooh, talk about that.
So important because it's where theoretically we gather, even if it's just living alone, and eat food and take in nourishment, but also with other people. Or again, if we live alone, we might be also inviting someone over or occasionally having people. And so often I see that that is the place that people pay the bills, etc. And sometimes that's the only option, depending on the space you live in which case I recommend, creating some sort of like storage thing, a basket or whatever that system would live in and would come out and would go away rather than staying out. Or while things are out, again, having the containerization. So just the difference between having a bunch of mail land on your entryway table, on your dining room table, and having a basket that it lands in is really huge. And I've often found that also helps with multiple people living in the house, that then people aren't like, hey, where did you put the whatever bill? I can't find the such and such. So reducing friction. Ideally, wherever you're going to open mail, you want like a recycling bin nearby and stuff. So I've had people outfit their whole dining room around that purpose because they had to. But if you can get it out, ideally we want no paperwork in the bedroom and none in the dining room. These are where we take in various kinds of nourishment.
This is a really good point. A couple others, if you need micro projects, I'm a big believer in like car as an option, medicine cabinet, toiletry drawer, purse, gym bag. You can get really micro. Refrigerator, just a drawer or a shelf in the refrigerator,
Condiments.
Condiments. Yeah, and I want to just talk a little bit about the importance of cleaning things before you put them back. This is something I think is a missed step in many cases. People get excited to put things away, and they're starting to put things away on dirty surfaces, or the objects themselves have just got that sheen of accumulated dust or oil.
Yes. You actually helped catch me potentially in a step that I should have said, which is, when I'm talking about like just pull everything out of a closet and don't look at it, don't do anything to prepare. The exception I would make to that is, say, a bookshelf or stacks of things on shelves, and you can see the dust. Take a vacuum. There's usually a setting on your vacuum that you can open a vent such that it doesn't suck the paper to it. It reduces the suction, but that you can go over the surface of things and get the majority of the dust up. And this is really important for your health, but also the health of your home, because that stuff, of course, gets airborne, and now it's all over everything else as well. And if you're going to pack up a bunch of stuff, vacuum it first, then get it in the boxes. Again, this, it doesn't go, say, for the clothing and most of the things we're talking about in that closet, but the hard stuff, it's really, really worth doing. And in the case of soft goods, maybe a bunch of it's going to get laundered. And so you can see how these projects take time if you're going to see them all the way through to fruition, and that there might be multiple steps. So like if you're going through, say, that closet, Laura, and a bunch of that's going to want to be washed, you might make sure your regular laundry is already done, so you've got a receptive space in your laundry room, and you can start that process.
I think it's also really helpful because it can be very de-energizing to handle dirty objects more than once. And Andrea caught me in the act of decluttering some stuff, and I was like, I just wasn't set up to clean it. I hadn't really remembered this part, so I didn't have a rag and a hot soapy water that I could just easily like kind of rough clean things with, not polish them, not, buff them to a shine, but just like get the gack off of the thing. So before I put it in this box to be sorted later, I wasn't setting myself up to go into a box, even also where dust from one thing would be spreading to another, a clean object, so that's just another fine point. Other questions that you guys have, anything that we've brought up that you want to first of all, let me ask you too, to what does this apply to your own clutter situation? Some of the things that we've talked about, is there something that you can bring away to do something with Okay.
Yay.
Yeah? Okay. Is there anybody who has, like, you have absolutely not addressed my issue? My issue is so extraordinary that nothing in this situation applies, because if it does, I'm interested in hearing about that. Sometimes we don't anticipate, like, maybe you have, like storage, units. People sometimes come up with things like that. And the same principles apply. It's just the bigger thing. Anybody have questions? Anybody at all? Yeah, Uma, let's hear from you. Oh, I got to get my earphone on. Hold on a second. Yeah. Hey, Uma. All right, I'm going to put you on. Sorry. Oh, dear. I just disappeared my entire Zoom window. That was not what I wanted to do.
We'll find them.
We're going to find you. Okay, go ahead, Uma.
So I just recently moved, and some of my issue is trying to figure out homes because I'm doing things and then I don't like them. I put my dresser in my closet. I hate it in there. So I want to pull it out, put my jewelry on it, put my salt lamp on it, and that beauty. But I assume it's just working with it and being willing to rearrange it until I figure out what works. Or do you have any, like I had a linen closet and now I have shelves under the sink. So the space is so different and I'm finding little of it is working for me right now. And as I've rearranged, some of that's helped. So if you've got any suggestions on a move and how to get settled.
That's a great question.
It is a great question. And I guess my big answer would just say in general, it sounds to me like you're doing the absolute right thing, which is noticing what doesn't work and why, and then maybe considering other options that so often for me, one of the fun things with declutterings, whether it's my own or someone else's, is again, helping things find their best place. So your dresser, right? Trying it out here and going, yeah, no, that doesn't really work. And so not seeing those as failures, they're just inevitable parts of the process, I would say.
Can I offer some counsel that Andrea gave me and continues to give me, honestly, is thinking about reducing the space and time between, like, how you're actually going to use the things, so the things that you use every day in the bathroom should be close to, if not in the bathroom, and toward the front of an available storage place if you use them frequently. Sometimes we get stuck in thinking, like the linen closet is where the linens have to go. But the truth is we're a single person and we only use a towel every once in a while, and the sheets get changed where they get changed, and we just keep. I have a friend who only has, I think, she has one set of sheets. She doesn't actually have a change of sheets. And finally, when she got a change of sheets, her solution was to fold them up and stick them flat between the mattresses. So she put her sheet between the mattress and the box spring and right at the edge so she could pull them out when she needed them, because she didn't have a linen closet. And so it's really useful to think about, what are the big parts of your life that deserve space in your home, that you every single day when you come home from work, or every day before work you do this, or every day when you are working, you need this amount of space to comfortably work? And what are the parts that could be pushed to the periphery or the less frequent, or that just don't deserve as much space? And that may change when you move to take a new job and you no longer have an office, or when you move to take a new job and you realize that you're lonely and you really want to have a place in your house where you can have people to come over, or where you're going to be able to be cozy in the evening with your dog or cat, and you want a nesting space. You never had a nesting space before. It wasn't an option maybe. But think about what your life is calling for, and let the space, you may have to try it different ways, but honor the priorities of your real daily life and think about that. The classic example was, I used to store my coffee making materials in one place that was like 12 steps across the kitchen from where my coffee maker and the water was. And I had to like hoof it over here to get this pitcher for the water and hoof it over there to get the thing. And the grinder was, and Andrea just like,
No. Better than that. It was behind the dish like drainer thing. So I'm watching her like making her coffee and I'm like, is it always like that? And she's like, yeah, why? And I'm like, oh my God. And we moved it and she was like, oh, you're a genius.
Yeah. Well, so here's some parting wisdom for you. First of all, I think it's really important to remember that the unhealthy default reality creates clutter, and the unhealthy default reality loves to keep you enmeshed in clutter. Because when you don't have a clear mind and a clear hierarchy, you become vulnerable, you become overwhelmed, freaked out, and you think that you just need another thing. Maybe you need more storage bins or containers. And you might. I mean, yeah, that's legitimate. But the unhealthy default reality benefits from having you in a foggy minded, overwhelmed, freaked out, I just can't state. Because when you're in I just can't, that's where you also become more vulnerable to passive media. I'll just watch TV. You can do some decluttering in front of the TV if you absolutely have to, along the lines of this is a sock and this is underwear. You know, if you can't, you just can't do it without something distracting. It's better than nothing. It's like stretching in front of the TV. It's not my favorite, but I'd rather have you stretch than sit like a lump, and I'd rather have you stretch there than not at all. But I think every time you look at a decluttering project, it's really helpful to put it in this framework of reclaiming your mojo, not just becoming another, I'm now a minimalist. I have a minimalist house, or I've made over my house and it looks perfect like in the movies or in the, this is not about achieving someone else's standard of aesthetic perfection or being, getting rid of your shame by having everything look perfect, but not feeling comfortable in your own home. So advocate for the healthy deviant self in you. And then I think you will make the right decisions. And Andrea is available to help if you want some help. I want to just finish on this note. So Andrea, you're starting to consider at least teaching some online classes around decluttering and feng shui. Do you anticipate that those will be coming in the next few months?
Yeah, I've always taught them in person, and I really stopped many years ago when I just got too busy, I guess. And I was working with people more one-on-one, which I've stopped doing much of for a whole variety of reasons, including being exposed to so many people's dust and mold.
Well, COVID,
well, yes, but I mean, even pre-COVID, I was like, God, this is really not great on my body. I do love the in-person, and I'll continue to do some sporadically, but I really, as you can tell, I'm excited about this work and love to help facilitate shift for people. And so just a couple months ago, as I'm noticing everyone's talking about the desire to refine their space, with having to be in it so constantly, I thought, I really should offer some online support that way. So I do plan to offer some classes in both feng shui and decluttering. And in the meantime, also want to be available for one-on-ones where, now that I have decent internet and I know how to use Zoom and FaceTime, COVID's done a lot for me, that's something that I could do with people one-on-one, for example, for an hour, and we could do multiple sessions, over different spaces and over time.
I think that's a really nice option particularly if you have difficulty getting started, or I've done some things with Andrea where I've hired her to come in and help me with stuff, and once I have like the setup and I know like this versus that is where I'm going to start, it gets easier. So Andrea's available to do the 1-hour consultations for $153, which I think is such a great deal, but everything is in multiples of 9 in feng shui. That's why it's $153. And that's basically you and her on a Zoom session going through your stuff, kind of like the closet thing, but in real time.
Setting it up and, talking in advance to figure out when we're going to do it and kind of what's the major focus. And I may be able to give you some leads ahead of our hour together so we can be really, really effective together.
Yeah. And in the meantime, like I said, we have some handouts that I'll share with you in the group or email to you. I'm not sure, I'll ask Tracy which she thinks is best, where Andrea's tips for doing this stuff so you can get started on your own. The Order Out of Chaos series, which is useful. The episode we did on decluttering, if you want to listen to this while you're decluttering and stay motivated, and more resources. Andrea also has a mailing list that if you get on it, she'll tell you when she's doing stuff and her yoga classes. She has a Patreon channel and some things like that.
So on my website, which is thirdmountain.com, it's just all words, all spelled out. I'm going to be doing some website updating. It hasn't happened. And so
your website is like 1985 and I love you, but
yeah, we've just updated a little bit. But so I don't currently, if you go there, there is a place to subscribe to my yoga email lists where you can specify if you're interested in international retreats, local, blah, blah, blah. And I do have a platform on Patreon where people join me and they can come onto my Zoom yoga classes, which I'm doing now as well. But for decluttering, if you're interested in being given notice practice of a decluttering class, just please send me an email. And you can do that straight from my website as well. It's just right there, and you'll just click me and you'll email and just say, hey, add me to your decluttering class list. And I'll make sure you get on there.
Yep, and we got all that information on the Facebook group as well. So in the meantime, I just hope you guys will continue to, Michael says, I love the idea of claiming my space. Thank you for the inspiration. Yay! And thank you for the lovely comments. Laura says, this has been fabulous. Thank you so much for your help. I'm truly motivated to get my decluttering started. Wonderful. Well, in the meantime, thank you for putting your attention on this aspect of healthy deviance that's often overlooked. And you know how we end every session. Healthy Deviants, unite! Healthy Deviants, declutter! We'll see you more soon. If you have follow-up questions, just post them in the Facebook group and we'll get to them there.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye. Thanks so much, Andrea. It was really fun.
Thanks.